Let me start off by giving you some context, because many of you are not from my part of the world, and a little bit of historical context will better understand the unique challenges that we are facing. Little bit about the country. It has a population of about 21 million people. GDP is about 79 billion and per capita is about 4,000. So we are a lower middle income country. We are a blessed country. For people from this part of the world, it looks a lot like Costa Rica. This is what the country looks like. It's unique. Its real sunrise industry is tourism. But unfortunately, it was man's folly that we had a 30-year civil conflict. Almost 100,000 people died. And these are some images of the civil conflict. So our economic development was significantly held back. We had a president who was a warrior president who ended the civil conflict. It was one of the few instances where a terrorist movement was militarily defeated. This is him. He became a national hero, hugely popular. The conflict was an ethnic conflict, so he represented the majority Sinhalese community and he was vastly popular. So he unleashed large amount of infrastructure, unfortunately funded with a lot of Chinese loans. What happened was that the country had a huge growth boom. The conflict ended in early 2009, and for the years 2010 to 2015, the economy grew on average at about 6%. But the problem was that a lot of the growth happened in non-tradable sectors. So it was in construction, in local mining, real estate that really pushed the economy forward. It was not a case of the East Asian country economic miracle where it was export-led growth. So he built a lot of infrastructure, a port in the south called Hambantota, a harbor without any ships, an airport without any planes, a tower without any purpose, and a ghost city without any people, and this city was in his electorate. So we are left with a huge debt. It's almost 79% of GDP, and the problem is that if you look at some of our neighbors, the debt is significantly lower, and our tax to GDP is also very low. So if you take it as a percentage of debt to revenue, it's almost 600%, the third highest in the world after Japan and Lebanon. So the problem is that because revenues are insufficient, almost 90 to 100% of revenues goes for debt servicing. So recently, with the change of quantitative easing, the currency has come under pressure, and we don't have a huge current account problem, but it's capital flight. And because of competitive depreciation of other countries, the local currency also has depreciated, and this has put more strain on servicing the foreign debt. This is what the export basket of the country looks like. The vegetable products means tea. Sri Lanka is very famous for tea from colonial times. It had tea plantations. And in each of its categories, especially textiles, it has done extremely well. It has become a global sourcing destination. For example, most of the factories that manufacture for Victoria's Secrets are based in Sri Lanka. These are not your typical apparel manufacturing companies. They are high technology, high skill companies. But as you can see, the product basket is very limited. In our part of the world, if you look at Vietnam, this is Vietnam's performance. It was a communist country and it only opened out about 25 years ago. And they have had huge export performance in so many diversified industries. Foreign direct investment has been poor. In fact, recently in absolute terms, it has been coming down. And if we compare with any of our neighbors as a percentage of GDP, it is extremely low. So it is being buffeted by economic headwinds, might I say even a crisis, and never waste a crisis that it is a great time to implement structural reforms. It's the 15th time the country is going to the IMF. We're just about to start an IMF program, but they're going to be very insistent that this time around there is very stringent structural reforms, especially in state-owned enterprises, and much more revenue. What do we have? It's a great neighborhood. It was blessed. It's in the southern tip of the Indian Ocean with large, of course, relatively underdeveloped economies. You have India, that is a giant neighbor, which is one of the fastest growing large economies in the world. You have Pakistan and Bangladesh also. We are part of the string of pearls. If you have to believe that strategy, everybody's geopolitical interests are aligned in this part of the world. The Human Development Index is quite good. Although it's a lower middle income country, it doesn't have the same human development indicators like South Asia. Literacy is very high. Primary school completion rate is 97, lower secondary school completion rate is 95%. Life expectancy is quite high. Population growth is low. The demographics are yet favorable. It's not as good as some of the other countries that have a lower median age. For example, India has about 26, Sri Lanka is about 33 years. Some of our demographic dividend, we have already exhausted it because the conflict, while the conflict was on, you need young people to fight, and they were young and the conflict ended when they got old. Another opportunity for the country is that it has a very low female labor participation, that of the male population, only about 50% is a female participation rate. So the male participation rate is about 70% and the female participation rate is only about 35%. So all future economic growth is going to depend on getting the women to work. So what can the country do? Due to the civil conflict, a lot of people left the country over the last 30 to 35 years. So in a population of about 21 million people, there are over 600,000 diaspora who have been born in the OECD countries. In the United States, there's about 50,000, a large number of people in Canada, in Australia. Many of these people have been very successful. Perhaps they are not entrepreneurs, but they have been professional, and even their children have done, because the Sri Lankans have generally had a high preference for education, so many of them are highly educated and have done extremely well. So the question is, how do you re-engage with this diaspora? And it was an ethnic conflict that the country had, and 2/3 of this diaspora is from the Tamil community, which was a minority. So the country has to heal internally to re-engage with these people, and this new government is taking many steps to do that. So let me share with you some successes of how the diaspora helped. This is a particular couple who actually were from Boston. They're based out of Boston. They built a company called Virtusa. They are listed on the NASDAQ, and they are one of the largest employers of IT professionals in the country. They're almost like a $500 million company. And this was one particular example of somebody who came here to study, remained behind, started a company, backwardly integrated. The next example is a company called MIT. Again, these are in IT space. It stands for Millennium Information Technology. As Ricardo has written, how you can catalyze something by government sourcing. In this case, it was a local stock exchange that put out a tender for an automated trading system. This particular company, with some US companies, got a leg in. They developed their own indigenous technology. Today, they are one of the 3 leading companies in the world who make stock exchange software. They got bought over by London Stock Exchange, and now London Stock Exchange has merged with the Deutsche Börse. So one of the other challenges is that in a population of about 20 million, there are about 1 million enterprises, of which 92% are micro enterprises, which have people less than 4 people. And less than 0.2% are the large enterprises, and this is based on a survey. So a larger enterprise is defined as just only more than 50 people. So basically, the micro enterprises represent about 44.5% of the people employed in the formal labor force, and the large firms have 25%. So unlike in some countries where large firms dominate, this problem is not there in Sri Lanka. But we don't have sufficient mid-sized companies, and one of the challenges is how do you encourage mid-sized companies to come about. The state is too dominant, that there is real crowding out, that not only they employ excess amount of people, but they also dominate certain sectors. So part of the IMF program is to open out all these sectors for competition, and also to try to privatize them. We have had free trade zones in the country because the country liberalized since 1977, and they were seeing what was happening in East Asia, and they have created free trade zones. These are the locations of these export processing zones, and luckily, I don't know whether consciously or it just happened that they were located in where the population was. Sometimes they go and locate things in politically sensitive areas, but in this particular case they put it where the population is, and they have been hugely successful. This chart just shows you the utilization rate, and in most of these export processing zones they're almost 100% utilization. So this is something that the country should try to replicate, that it is a nice way to attract foreign investors, that you sensitize them, sanitize conditions, and it's much easier for them to navigate, and you don't have to deal with messy neighbors. So the Prime Minister has come up with a new initiative called Agency for Development. I'm a board member on it. It is trying to aspirationally look at what the Economic Development Board did for Singapore. It is a sunset agency. It will have only 3 years. It has yet not been passed in Parliament, but it will hopefully happen in the next 2 months. This agency will look to work with the Centre for International Development. It has a full-time CEO, and it has overriding powers over certain institutions. So it's supposed to be a totally focused thing to allow horizontal coordination, because what happens is that we have a large government with large amount of ministers, and the coordination generally goes up and then comes down. Here that we want people to coordinate horizontally. And my time is up. Thank you very much.